You are early.
Yep.
I've just been looking at your timeline again, and it's just super, super nice just playing with it. I just have a little question. When you click on something and you see cited by in kind of a light blue and then a red one for the future, do we really need to have two separate colors? I think it would be nicer if it's the same color because we know future and past is different anyway. That's just me being aesthetically annoying with too many colors is weird.
Yeah, I haven't been too happy with the colors. Um, they are not good looking at the moment, at least. There is kind of a distinction when you cite a paper or a paper that is at the same conference. There is a distinction. Then you don't really know if it is citing or if it, yeah, in which direction the citing goes, because it can be both, of course. But that is the only unclear thing.
That's a good point, actually. God, how annoying can you be? Also, I had a chat with Mr. Anderson, who pointed out. Oh, hang on. No, we don't want music to play now. Who pointed out that you've implemented select text and enter to put it into the search.
Yep.
That's really cool and very powerful. Really cool. I do have to ask a big question, and that is, can you, wow, it's raining like crazy now. Can you relatively easily implement so that you can copy BibTeX from here of whatever you're looking at? Because that would allow students like me to easily cheat and just cite like mad.
Yeah, I guess so. The question is, this will be a good case study for how to actually export good BibTeX entries from a dataset that isn't really BibTeX but a database, and doing a good BibTeX entry manually.
Obviously, I hope it'll be wrapped in Visual Meta. So this would be a really good case study for exactly that. And the BibTeX is, of course, just the middle bit, but also on Friday, most likely my programmer Jacob will be joining us, and he will have to change how author exports Visual Meta based on the discussions we have all had for a while. So I think it would be good if we spend some time today preparing for him so he can disagree or just accept what we've done rather than start the discussion in front of him, so to speak.
Yep. So search is interesting here. I really it's super useful, and it's also sometimes annoying. So, but I really like. At first, I had the Command F thing. You select the text, press Command F, and it's automatically search for it. And I really like the Enter thing. That whenever you press Enter, it's so quick. It's even quicker. Command F is quick. Enter is even quicker. So
when you're
you fly your.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I completely agree with you. And it removes part of the needs of our discussion on names, because I just selected Klaus Atzenbach now, and I could see it's not perfect, but it should, maybe, as in, I don't know, based on our discussion, but it's amazing to be able to see what he probably authored in the past. And so far, it looks right.
And what I do now in my version, I sent Mark another version, the search version, for him to put up somewhere, the latest one. Now I double click on a word and just press enter, and everything lights up, and it's super useful, I think.
Oh, that's probably what I'm looking at. That's probably what I'm looking at.
Is that the version I sent Mark an hour ago? Or is it my version on my site?
Hang on. No, he sent a link. It's
okay. Good.
Yeah, adam3.index. Yeah.
Yeah, could be mine. So just double click on a word and press enter,
I know, it's fantastic. It's
and that gets around that. You just double click on a family name, a last name, and a presenter, and then you get most of the hits right. And if you need to do, if it's a Dr. Anderson with many people named Dr. Anderson, you just include Mark in that search to narrow it down if you really need. But in most cases, it's not needed.
So you know this guy, right?
Stuart.
Russell.
That Russell. Yep.
Bertrand Russell.
Bertrand Russell. Stuart.
So
yep.
Yeah, I saw what happened in your head there. It's so interesting because I don't like to be pretentious. We're going into philosophers and stuff, but here's a whole book called Human Knowledge, right? And he ends the book with all human knowledge is uncertain, inexact, and partial. And I think
it's 4 p.m.
That's very much what we are dealing with.
Yep.
And accepting in this work that we will do things to help people navigate, but we're not pretending that we're dealing with chemistry. It's not A plus B equals C all the time. There's going to be stuff, it's going to be issues, but we're not going to allow that to slow us down or stop us. It's really exciting. Other than the color and the copy as Visual Meta /BibTeX, the highlighted box at the bottom, can we do things with that?
Yeah, of course. What should be done there, or what are?
I think what I would like to see, and I'm thinking just out loud. One is a drop shadow would actually be nice to really.
Yeah. It should really be a drop shadow to be consistent with the other drop shadowy thing on the top as well, and.
Yeah, well, the ones on the top, I think we should probably put on the bottom actually, because
yeah, I'm contemplating removing the options thing and putting it somewhere in line, or so it's visible, especially for demo purposes. I think it's good to actually see the help. Which version do you see now? But to see the options and the checkboxes maybe a bit more prominent on the page. For a power user, of course, you want to hide it and have commands. But just for demo purposes, I think it's even better to just show it for now being. And then we could move it into an options box.
Just opening something here. Yeah, the top bit, I really, also, I don't think that the option in Visual Meta should have a drop shadow. Because they are tools, not information. They have no visual contribution to make. So I really feel they should be as hidden as possible. I mean,
you mean the search?
Yeah, not hidden as possible. That is not
no,
what I mean is they should be as unobtrusive as possible.
Yeah. Still, I'm not really sure if I want it to be. If they are moved down, then it's clear. But I don't want them to be part of the page, part of that diagram, because then you could think that it's kind of a label for the diagram, and it's not. Need to do a checklist here for.
Your enter thing, to put it on the record, is really an interesting and powerful thing. I think it is akin to making the search the URL bar into a search bar, which is one of those duh moments that changed the web. I think what you've done here with enter is similar to that. It's just absolute genius.
And I really liked your comments on the underlying data.
You can't walk in on us when we're doing compliments.
No, I just saw Adam's comment, about the inconsistency in some of the text strings is, absolutely on the money. And so it, to me, it re-emphasizes the two halves of this process. One is just the very sort of thing you've mentioned, where we make the sort of broadly we cut down on the amounts of knobs and switches and boxes and things. Of course, it has to be balanced on the other end by being sort of generously predictive about what people might want. So, the fact that people have chosen their own title for the same thing for years and years affected no one until we actually wanted to do, simple search on it.
So, Frode, to understand what we're saying here, did you publish a fixed version or did you keep it as it was, Mark?
So me or Frode?
You, Mark.
I did send Frode a link. I put it in a separate folder for now, because in case there are any tweaks that are writing, but essentially I'll put it in the sidebar.
So, and which data set have you switched the conference names, or did you?
No, I haven't yet. I need to think about that, because another part of me is with a sort of curator's hat on is I probably need. I think it's responsible to hold the source. So from a scholarship point, I hold on to what people actually used. But my view is, in light of your comment, it's next to useless for the reader. So I need to think about how I clarify that, put that into a separate field that you can then use. In the same way, I probably need to give you either an order field or a page number so that we can sort
the columns, because now they are random, almost. No, not random, but they are sorted for by implementations for implementation reasons. Yeah,
and I understand that, because of course people think that if you write, well, it's random, they're thinking, why would you deliberately make it random? Thinking, no, it's not like that at all.
So Frode, if you search for ACM here,
I have, and I absolutely love it. By the way, Raphael,
search for ACM again.
Oops.
Apologies. Let me just put this in.
So what you see here is that is this the same? Yeah. You have just scrolled it. If you scroll this to the left, you see that one of the conferences have dropped ACM from the conference preceding names, and that was actually from the published. Was that from the papers, Mark? Or was it?
Yeah, no, that's from the ACM library. So I've just, for Raphael, I've put a URL to the version of what we're talking about. Adam's added a nice new touch so that you can select a word and hit return. I think actually, as I wrote to you, I think we don't need the heat. As a result, I don't think we need the heat map switch anymore, because when you turn it on, it shows I think a specimen heat map, but it's not clear what that specimen heat map is, apart from the fact it is one.
Just look at this, Raphael. Right, select manual whatever, enter, and you can see. Oh, that paper.
Are we sharing?
I am. I'm sharing.
Apologies. Yeah, I missed that. Sorry, my apologies. Yeah.
I'm sharing my whole life there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what Adam has done, as I was saying a bit earlier, is I think it's such a big deal. It's by making the select text and hit enter to do an instant search. It's just
that's quite nice.
Incredible, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen that that use, like selecting and just pressing enter to.
Yeah, and that works when you don't when you're not having significant text entry functionality, and in this view it's more kind of a browse and collect view, I guess. And then you need some sort of other views where you write notes and so on, and then everything will break horribly because I hijacked tab and enter for this interface, and that's super nice until you really need your tabs and enters or returns back.
A fascinating thing too about this is that well, not because these visualizations weren't out when we did it, but the paper about the data set that Dave Millard and I put into ACM just got bounced as I for reasons I understand. But what was really interesting is their comments were along the lines of, well, what's the point? Or haven't you looked at this other paper, which is all about how to figure out the name of a paper, effectively how to game the system. If you put all these terms in, it'll win. I'm thinking if that's what I'm doing, I'm going to give up now, because the point of this is exactly the sort of conversations we've been having about looking for the unexpected, seeing the patterns in things. And it's really interesting how, sort of, for instance, the academic people, admittedly they've not seen your visualizations, but nonetheless, they don't even seem to be open to the idea of this sort of exploratory work, which I find fascinating in itself.
And looking at a timeline view of this in a very wide screen monitor like mine is great, because I can see all the years in a really good resolution.
Mm.
So what is going on here? Sorry, I'm in Photoshop and Photoshop's not behaving as I want it to. Delete.
Maybe because you're screen sharing and that puts Photoshop in some sort of full screen mode.
It just puts it in a be embarrassed in front of your friends mode, I think. So yeah, I'm just in terms of the visual presentation, especially now that Raphael is here, I'm thinking the colors of the history and the future. Adam pointed out, Raphael, that it is completely obvious that the papers on the left are citing the paper that's selected, and the papers on the right are the ones who cite, sorry, the other way around. But you may sometimes cite within the same year or the same conference. That's why it's having two different colors. But these colors are not exactly perfect. So Raphael, I think you may be the best to come up with a nice color scheme for this. Is that something you'd be interested in working on?
Yeah, I mean, that's usually something we do, just like if it's in the past or it's a 50% opacity or something, or like a grayish color. But yeah, I can take a look at how that would look like visually, for sure.
We probably ought to stick it on the orange blue colorblind scale and all that jazz if we want to be up with the hunt.
Wait, okay, here's a question. Okay, if we stay, is this because of redshift? That something that moves away from you is red and towards you is blue, or the other way around?
In what sense?
Then astronomy. Also with sound, like the Doppler effect.
Yeah.
Right? So if we encode it into that, but with nicer colors, Adam agrees that it should be a nicer color. So if you look at that, what is future and what is past? Is future compressed, or is past? I guess past goes out, right? Hang on.
Future should be blue shifted and past should be red shifted.
Red should be past.
Yeah. Because the future is racing towards us, so that should be blue shifted. And then the past is stretching out behind us, getting further and further away. So I'd red shift that.
Native red and blue shift. I haven't heard of that. But I'm
would
looking at the Wikipedia now, and
would this call cultural sensitivities in some locales? We're heading towards a blue future and leaving a red past.
And soon they want me to have some sort of scrolling effect here. When you move fast, everything gets Doppler color.
One thing that I'll make plain in the overview page I'm writing on this is I'm aware that at the moment the degree to which the bottom panel on the screen we're looking at the moment impinges the timeline is simply due to the depth of your browser. So if you're in a big window, that pop-up, as it were, will be clear of the timeline. At the moment, it's over the timeline slightly because there isn't enough room in the window, which after the fact makes common sense.
Yeah, and but we could have a wide window instead, where the title and some facts go to the left and the abstract to the right.
I think it's easier to read in a narrower column generally. I don't know, and I'm very happy to be wrong on that. What might be is just to make could the lower window simply just push the overall window larger, in other words, so the person could scroll and have. So in other words, the box is drawn clear of the upper panel.
Yep.
And if there isn't enough room in the browser, so the browser, you can scroll the browser window and have the two clear. Because I think that sort of thing would be evident to the reader, and that gives some clarity there.
Yeah, the current implementation was mostly because I wanted to make objects that you can move around and drag around. Yeah. So I made them as kind of floating cards here.
Yeah.
But if it's not a floating card, and currently it's not really, we don't have any functionality showing that, then it doesn't make sense to.
I mean,
put
one
too
other
much-
thing that might be experimentable with is, in addition to doing this markup, is on making a selection, is to just slightly drop the saturation of all the other items. So in other words, we're just subtly also making the color bits pop a bit more. So you see, so in other words, they become even more of a shape and less of a sections of text.
Which ones?
Well, so right, sorry. When I think we're not showing anymore, but so when you select something, you see some items are coloured, you know, before and after that thing. I'm just wondering if it might be useful, in a sense, to drop, if it's not, you know, computationally expensive, to drop the opacity of all the non-selected things, so that the coloured items just stand out a bit more. So the text of the unhighlighted items become even more just visual placeholders indicating the size of the column they live in, rather than actually any textual effect. So that doesn't draw the eye away from the main relationship that's being shown.
Yep, and
Sorry, I was talking to Emily about dinner there. Apologies.
also you can move around by arrow key now, left and right, if you like to, and that's quite useful.
Oh, right.
I didn't. So if you want to browse around.
And on my magic mouse thing or on a trackpad, you're doing the same. So that's really nice. Yep, like that.
Yeah. So as far as so here's an important thing, guys. On Friday, most likely Jacob, my programmer, will be joining us. So it would be really good if we can get kind of ready for him, so that we talk about visual meta formatting with him. So when it comes to the design of this amazing timeline and so on, let's keep going on that. But Raphael, because you have such a good eye for this kind of design, would you like to put together some suggestions for all of us based on what Mark and everyone is saying?
Sure, you're thinking about interface for how we're going to present that on the website?
I'm thinking about, before you guys enter, because Adam was early, which was great fun for me, so I got to talk to him all by myself. A little detail that I suggested was the box that comes out at the bottom, to have a drop shadow to kind of remove it from the rest. So that kind of talk, you know, like the look and feel of this, particularly because the colors are really awful, as Adam said. And I'm not sure myself how to fix it, to be honest, even though I'm artist and designer and all that stuff. I'm also wondering if maybe color shouldn't necessarily be the main thing. Maybe what we do is fade out. I think that's maybe what you said, Mark. Everything.
Yeah, essentially, yes.
Yeah. So and also the options in search top left, I think that has to go. I think there should be a little icon for options. I think the search should be at the bottom. Top of the screen is obviously the most expensive real estate.
So it's mostly interface design then?
Yeah, visual look and feel interface design, because the interaction now is just so absolutely astoundingly good. And
essentially it's a polish that would be, you know, complete do-over work if it had been started earlier. Because I think, you know, that the broad framework that Adam's put in, especially in you know, this particular demo, I think it holds together as a whole. So this is now putting some visual polish on it that just makes it more accessible to the user. Well, given that we've got the structure, I've made a side note to give Adam some more information to improve sorting and his point he's raised about some of the labels are actually unhelpful. Because the conferences have chosen to use inconsistent name formats across the years and things like that.
Exactly.
I'm also talking with Dave in context of the SIGWeb and the conference, see if I can find a way to get a sort of peer review. What I would like to do is have a set of keywords, well, a set of tags that are peer-reviewed sourced and not just written by me or the authors. It's clear that the authors' keywords are pretty useless. You know, about 50% of them are nonce words that apply to one item only. So that's not helpful. And I wouldn't want to just have one person look at that, you know, because there's a degree of subjectivity. But one of the most useful bits that we can't yet, but we could, if we had the information in the data set, use in Adam's visualization is to sort of say, right, show me all the spatial hypertext papers, or show me all the social network stuff.
Okay, yeah. I'm just a bit concerned about focus and things today. But
Yeah, sure.
Annoying as you, Mark, and ask Adam, in this timeline view, the horizontal view, lines? Because that's a really explicit way, because sometimes citations are off the screen, right or left. Lines could be either horribly abusive, unless we gray out everything else, or they could really help people see the spread and thickness of citations. What do you think?
I would try to stay away from the lines so far. I'm not too fond of lines unless they really tell you something new.
I mean, I asked for lines, and I'm glad you didn't put them in.
Nope. I looked at the cytology thing, and I disagreed with several decisions they made. They didn't use a baseline, a bottom line. It was kind of like a vase. It was symmetrical around the x-axis, and then it's harder to see how big the bars are. So I moved away from that, and I also moved away from the lines because they don't really show you too much. It's cool in some ways, and they can be put there.
Could to answer Fred's question, and this really it's for Adam in the sense of I don't know how complicated this is to do, but given that lines have a problem of their own, could there be some way to hint on the screen that there are items that lie outside the visual area?
Yep, you can do it like they do in some computer games. You have markers in the corner where you see that 3 items are outside. Now we're in a way approaching a very polished product, and that phase, and kind of maybe nice to have and not need to have.
No, understood.
So and it's quite a lot of work compared to like fixing sort orders and doing other more functional things. You could also put a label on the side saying that you should buy a 4K screen, like Raphael. That's expensive for the user, but it's nice because then you can see the whole.
I think this is one of the few uses of a large screen for the kind of work that I do that I see beneficial. Adam, what you talked about there, that comes from fighter plane radars. So if something is out of the screen, then at the top of it, even if it's many, many miles away, it's there, it's stuck to the top of the screen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about on the side having, there's 3 things outside. So there's 3 red dots or blue dots, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and it would maybe be good to show the number of hits as well.
Yeah, but if you show one each, then you stack them, then they get an instant visual feel. But you're right, that's a polished product thing, and that's not really.
I think the relevant part at this stage, exactly, it's not necessary to then build that. The part of the reason for asking the question is to say, I'm thinking of it from the source end. That I know shouldn't need more than we already have. But if there are things that we want to do that mean I need to think about just adding something into the data set or actually having to create something to stick in the data set, and I'm cool with that. But then I can start on that if it's needed. And I take the point about polish. And we don't want to do too much nugatory work at this point. But knowing what's doable, but just not necessarily worth the effort at this point. It's still worthwhile, I think, to cover.
Yeah, and we can write it down as a thing. If for a rainy day, I can do that. So, and actually, we had rainy days here. That's why you got search.
Rain is good. Rain is good. I just have to ask about this other view.
Yep.
2 things. One is I saw you have an option to not show the abstracts. But what about having an option where you don't show the abstract, but you show the heading abstract and you click on that and that gives you the abstract, so that becomes the toggle?
Yep, like the one you similar to the PowerPoint you showed us.
Yeah, but much less stuff done.
Okay, just a toggle for the abstracts. You can expand it or.
Yeah, if you click abstract now, then the abstract goes away, and maybe it's then gray. You click on it, comes back and becomes a heading again, something simple like that. That would be really cool.
Yeah, I haven't given this interface too much love yet because I wanted to have I wanted us to discuss it more.
But look at these lines.
yeah, that was all the love it got.
It's amazing.
But it's yeah, it's cool. Because there are many underlying things we need to think of first. For example, here, if you make a more narrow selection in the main view, let's say we filter by author here, so the main list becomes quite short, maybe 5 entries with all the papers Guimarães has written.
Yeah.
What happens when you then click a cited link or citation or a cited bio? Will that list expand? Will that author selection because now then do you get my point?
I do. I think that find and filter are kind of different in this sense. So if we have clicked here, hit
Yep.
enter, so it's only those, then it'll show all of that author in the middle.
Yep.
But what I really, really hope that can then happen, everything that author is cited is on the left, and everything who cites that author's paper is on the right, but the lines go to the individual paper. But yes.
So what happened? Yeah, that is a discussion we had with Dave a week ago or so. So what happens when you press one of those links? Will Guimarães papers in the middle column, will that get removed, that selection, and replaced by something else?
I think the filter goes away. The search goes away when you click on cites or cited by.
And what will be shown instead? The full list, the
Yes.
default list?
Yes. The thing that Dave, even though he's my advisor and he's super wise, the thing we disagree on is, it seems, he sees people and papers as different things. I see.
And you see them as.
No, in this context, text is text. Like the year here, 1990, doesn't have semantic meaning for the system at the way it's displayed, but it has a human meaning. So whether you click on a keyword or a person or whatever, it shouldn't matter. It is just used to filter that central column. But if you do a filter based on a person, then it will show, you don't even have to go further. You can use the find that you have in the other view because it works well enough. But then what will be truly visually useful, I think, is all the sites going to all the different documents, not just to one, but to all of them, so you can see which ones are popular with that person. That will be quite useful.
So, but if you deselect this one, shouldn't you, by the same logic, get all papers that has ever been cited by the main list by the same logic? Because it's switching logic in a way by not showing them then.
Let's pretend we have the search dialog from the other screen at the bottom of this screen, right? And if I now click the X to remove this guy's name, then yes, I think central column should be everything.
Yep.
And cites and cited by should be whatever document was in focus. It should be like it is now.
And if you click on 1990, should all papers that has been cited by 1990's paper be on the left and the right? That is not clear to me.
You're pointing out something really important. You're pointing out that there is a huge difference between papers and people, even in this layout. You're absolutely right. And that is why with the second mockup, I felt that if you're working with people, you don't have the title bold, you have the person bold. So it does actually toggle between those things. So of course, Dave is right. He's a million times wiser than me, but I still think we can get around it by following your line of questioning.
Yeah, and it can be worth exploring this. And maybe we have a special people mode that shows it like you say, but it must be crystal clear, and the expectation, we must handle expectations here, that user understand what is shown, and that the interface isn't.
It can just be a toggle, like look for people, look for papers. People, it's just like people and papers in the little toggle that goes between them.
I'm aware Peter's got his hand up before we motor past what he maybe wanted to comment on.
Okay. Been a rough morning. I was at the dentist at 8:30 until just a couple minutes before the meeting started, while they're trying to get my dad's mouth back under control. So I wasn't able to get the demo I wanted to show working for today. However, I'm doing a lot of work manipulating the data set. And one idea I'm looking at is taking a look at how many times each work has been cited in the corpus, then looking at the maximum number of work has been cited in the corpus, pegging that to be 100% opacity. A work that isn't cited anywhere in the corpus would be 0 opacity, and I'm going to use the opacity as a way to visualize that. The other thing I'm thinking about then is looking at a paper's participation in the corpus, which is to say the inbound link count and the outbound link count, and then looking at the aggregate inbound and outbound link counts over the entire corpus and use that to peg it. Another possibility is to set the item's color based upon the ratio of inbound links to outbound links. So you could have the red component of the color associated with the degree to which the paper has inbound links, and actually inbound links, that would be the blue component, yeah. And outbound links would be the red component. So a paper that's equally cited in and cited out would be purple, and a paper that has only outbound links to it would appear red, and a paper that only had inbound links pointing to it but hypothetically doesn't cite anything would be entirely blue. So maybe by Friday I'll have some demos to actually play with that. The other thing I'm doing is for my list of year view that Adam has, I'm duplicating that, only I'm putting it in a scrollable container so that you have a scroll bar in the bottom and you can scrub forward and back in time without having to scroll the overall window, which makes it a little bit easier for ancillary displays to hit around it without getting pushed off the screen as you would if you just had a single wide stretched view that was bigger than your window. So I have some stuff to demo, hopefully on Friday, barring the stitches coming out in my dad's mouth and having to race him back to the dentist again.
I just put in the sidebar, I'm rewriting the cover page for the demos, but if you have anything that you either would like me to put up on a web or to link to, I'm very happy to do it then, have all the attribution, everything in place, which is a key point, I think, in this whole thing here, is so people know where it's coming from and who's contributing towards it. But the useful thing about being able to at least have a link on the page I just shown is this is becoming the nexus for a separate conversation that's going on with for Dave and the people in ACM, probably Fred as well. So it's kind of useful to be able to, even if the conversation is happening here, to show people sort of what we're doing, because I think we're pushing on an open door at the moment. It's the feeling I get. But it's quite clear that a lot of people actually need to see something before they can really imagine it. So this is, I think, incredibly important. And that's why, I mean, it doesn't bother me too much as to the polish, because I'm very aware that some of the polish takes a disproportionate amount of work. And at this point, we're not trying to show it to the whole world and no one will be confused. We're really trying to show it to people who should be able to sort of see past the rough edges.
Also, I'm looking at doing some displays off of the keywords. And then I'm thinking about trying to set up a co-citation matrix so that I can start looking at clustering of authors and clustering of papers by keywords. There are a whole bunch of, so right now I've been doing mostly is writing support utility functions that take Mark's original data set and produce massage views of it, and then I'll move to the visualization of those later in the week.
And one thing I'll try and do is I'll try and work out a sort of a not Byzantine structure to sort of come up with a form of name normalization. Because again, I'm juggling the fact that I want to hold on to the provenance of the original names as published, even if, frankly, even if they're misspelt. But because that's what it was. What we want to work with is just that, this person who may have sort of 5 different names across the data set is the person. So when we want to see their contribution or their map to others, that will benefit you both. And I'll see if I can find a way to sort of put that together. And I'll just push that as another augmented data set as a drop into in other words, so it won't affect what you've got. It'll just give you more columns to play with.
Just going back to the earlier bits, just sharing a simple mock-up. We could quite literally, if you select an author name and hit enter, at the top of the screen say papers authored by that person. Because also if someone chooses to take a screenshot of this and use it in their own papers, it's self-explanatory. And if you, when you do a keyword search, you do papers with the keyword so-and-so.
Well, especially as in the other demo where you gave us the option, or did at one point, to drop out, get an SVG or something of this. And I think that's really quite interesting, because if you start from the premise that this data set is not, in a sense, proprietary or something, then actually being able to spend probably some time finding the very strand that you want, and then taking that out, even if only as a picture, but possibly in a future incarnation as a sort of strand of data, I think is a real win too, because it's just democratizes the whole thing.
Yeah, especially if you do a search for keywords that are popular, how they come and go or appear in the corpus. Just having the overview with the things highlighted is useful enough to see when social media entered the picture and what happened and how it followed the popularity of the conference and so on, and do a commentary. Just having some sort of visual overview without anything being readable really, but you get an impression on what happened. It can be very useful.
Yeah. So
Peter?
an important thing, because this is just too much fun, is the thing to talk to Jacob about on Friday. And I'm going to show you, okay, yeah, Peter, please, since we're changing topic, I saw your hand, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's any kind of a data set anywhere that would relate people to what organizations they were affiliated with that we'd be able to query. And if not, maybe I might put in a user interface widget so that you could start augmenting the database as you're looking at papers with that information. So while you're going through this visualization, there could be like a little pane to add supplemental notes that would then add that into the data set, and maybe down the road even automatically merge that with some central data server.
I would say in passing, I sort of started looking at that, and the place I wouldn't start is DLACM, sadly. That's just not no one's properly curated that. And although there are lots of things that you can links you can press in the library there that go to somewhere, it's full of holes. That's one thing that held me up a lot in actually creating the data set and trying to dedupe authors and things, is that so I don't know what's there. But again, another thing I took away from the making of this is just yet another bit of the sort of underpinnings that's really quite fundamentally broken, so that whether we're doing it here or we're doing it in some completely different domain, these are things that you can't just lowball, and you've actually got to address, even if only going forward.
How much is printed on the actual papers, like affiliation for individual authors?
It is there, but even over time, people will change the way, because no one requires it to be constant. So someone who's published, across say 20 years of the thing, and probably has worked for the same organization, may actually use 5 or 6 different things. Maybe they squeezed it because they had to get more authors in, there was a shorter life. So there are all sorts of really pragmatic things that just really mess up the data, which means that automatic retrieval gets hard. And I'm one who's not immediately then liable to jump to the next thing and say, oh, we'll just sort it with AI, because we don't know what problem we're solving until we actually look at it. But we could do some of that. I certainly haven't done any as yet because it's another large trawl, and I'm probably pushing the size of what Tinderbox is actually comfortable to work. I mean, I can put lots of notes in, but if I want to do stuff with it, I can start to glue it up quite quickly. Though I could do a separate, I mean, I could probably do, once I've got actually some UIDs sorted out for things, I probably could effectively treat different documents as different source data tables, which might move us forward, but it's not an overnight job.
Right. Are we okay moving on to, okay, there's a bit of head shaking. Okay, I just want to show you really briefly. This is kind of the opposite of what we're working on, but there's a point. Talking about hypertext and not hypertext. So this morning, in my own work, for my own PhD, I have to do a lot of writing based on what my advisors tell me, right? So what I currently do, I just put in italic, what I'm trying to say here is blah, blah, blah. That's what I have agreed with my advisor. So that's actually super useful. It's like a pencil on paper. So what I have asked Jacob to develop, and this is just for me, but there is a point to me telling you guys, and that is if I select text and do Command-Shift-N to make it a note, that text becomes red and italic, like you can see in this mock-up here, right? Why am I doing it this way? I mean, doing it this way, not just so it's visually different, but also if you do Command-Shift-N without selecting text, all of that toggles on or off in the document. So that means you can have this document that you are building with your own notes, and then you can easily export it without this stuff. So it's really, but look, we agreed on this, blah, blah, blah. That's the reason for it. But the reason I'm bringing it up now is Mark Anderson, being annoying sometimes, has a bigger idea for this. And I don't think we can do it now, but it's to do with the visual meta of it. And that is, if this is encoded in visual meta, even if it's exported without it, that should mean that a teacher should be able to, at some point, I think I have a screenshot mock-up. 1 second. Yeah, see that tiny little bar? So the teacher should be able to do Command-Shift-N in Reader, and everywhere there is a note like this in the document, a little bar shows up on the side. Click on it, and this text is then apparent. The reason for that is that the teacher should be able to learn the student's intent without the student having to write it in a formal way. And the reason I'm bringing it up to you guys now is that we currently use JSON for endnotes and stuff like that. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are for adding all this kind of paratext to visual meta, endnotes, this kind of stuff, glossary, and so on. What is the suggested way? We should talk to Jacob on Friday.
Well, I'll say that I said, you know, I'm not sure I can comment actually authoritatively on that because I'm, you know, although I create data that goes into data sets, the encoding of it is not something I'm au fait with, you know, as to whether we use method A or method B. My observation though is that JSON is, in terms of current state of the art, about as ubiquitous as it gets, and whilst being reasonably safe.
Yeah, it is, but it is, where did he say it now? He said somewhere in chat that he thinks it's probably time to move beyond that. And
did he have an alternate suggestion?
Not yet, and if he has, that's great, but I'm just thinking, now that we're taking Mark's stuff and put an Adam front end on it, and hopefully we can do the magic copy as visual meta soon, you guys have an actual workflow. So I'm hoping that he can benefit from your experience. So if you have a suggestion, great. If not, that's not a problem at all.
I think. The other thing I like about this, inter alia, as well as the sort of, for instance, the student being able to signal their intent, I got to the wrong place, but for the right reason, is quite interesting. But actually, it's also building in, it's putting structure possibly into annotation of documents. almost accidentally, but actually I think this could be quite useful because, you know, and other things we've discussed in other sort of discussions is this problem about, you know, how we capture the marginalia and this kind of thing. So the same mechanism you're talking about, I think, could also support that over and above your, you know, the dynamic view and this really decomposed annotation. But if you want, you know, effectively, I know it feels like code comments, and I made this analogy, and I'm going to bring up, but I think it is definitely not that. But it, in a way, fulfills the same thing. So it might even be when you come back to your draft that you abandoned 6 months ago, you can remember why on earth you wrote what you did.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, Peter.
And when I saw that, I started thinking, gee, it'd be nice to do something like that for literate programming. I know it's not currently part of author's capabilities, but it really would make sense if we had maybe like a command shift. We're already using D, but basically a command shift combination for defining a name section. The same name could be used at more than one place in the document, and then another command shift for inserting it. The other probably just make that visually visible in the text by prefacing a paragraph with when we, the name of the fragment, and any indented paragraphs under that would be stuff that'd be inserted that, and then here we, with a colon, the name of the fragment, and that would cause everything that was when we at other spots in the document to be injected in the final rendered copy at the here we spot. So that's something I've been toying with, and probably at some point I'm going to wind up turning Tinderbox into a literate programming tool, because I think all the hooks are already in there, and it's just a matter of spending time to implement the project in it.
Is that the thing you just mentioned, not before the Tinderbox bit, is that in a sense a one-time transclusion, or is that a pervasive transclusion? I don't know there needs to be an answer to that. It's sort of a rhetorical question.
I think it'd be pervasive.
Okay.
Adam, do you have any strong thoughts on this? On the how best to store bits of metadata that's basically prose, not just few tags?
Oh, this is so multi-dimensional, so I don't even know where to start talking about it. It's complicated and even complex in that it.
Well, one thing to try and pick that apart is, do we or, you know, to put it back to Fred, do you envisage the notes as being really anything more complicated than, you know, some alphanumeric stuff? So you're not going to suddenly stick a data table in it or something like that. You really are, you know, so the starting assumption is, so that we know if we start to color outside the line. So what we're really doing is we're writing a textual annotation, because that sort of makes it simpler, because we know what we're dealing with. The moment because if that contains further data, I think that's a rabbit hole that if I think that Adam may be alluding to, you know, how much structure are we capturing? So there's the encoding of the note, and then what is the note itself encoding, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and is the note pointing towards anything? Yes. Or is it just, what is it? Is it pointing to the text coming after the note, or before the note, or beside the note?
Yes.
There is no notion of a beside in a strictly linear document, but should there be? As programmers struggle with this all the time, because we want to make comments and documentation for the code, and write down some gotchas and to-dos and everything, but we have to do it linearly before or after the actual code, and that is very, very problematic, because we have so many dimensions that we would like to add to something, and we do it in order, because that is the only thing we can do with text files. But to be honest, we want to have it kind of annotated or sideways, that you comment on something, you comment on the code, not before the code. And if you can capture the comment on thing, you would win 100 things later on. And so I struggle with this as well, to find a way out of the too overly linearized documents.
I think we are dealing with very different issues in a paper versus code, because when I started with author, to do a citation, you had to select text and do Command T. So there was always a quote. And then I was told, no, academics should not quote. They should just cite to prove you've read it. So that changed that. So the notion of commenting on code is different from an academic paper. The citation should be separate. So also with this, the linear view is, I'll just share the screen for ease, 1 second. So when you look at this, when I'm working on it as a student, I have just free-form written it, but it is different from body text in the same way a heading is different from body text. It is a complete encapsulation. A body text in author, of course, when you fold the document, it all goes away. It only see the heading. So it has a complete, it cannot be part of the text. It has to be line break above and below. That's really important. Otherwise it gets very, very messy.
So basically, the addressability is to an offset within the linear flow, the canonical linear flow of the document.
Yes. So in terms of the human interaction, the thinking is, because you cannot reflow a PDF, which is annoying in this sense, is that essentially this big block gets a line on the side. So the document removes this, but if you do that interaction to have something on the screen, it's indicated here, but it pops up in a box, like you would have one of those little yellow stickies. So the location that is required would be, like here in Mark's paper, between these two selected lines, if there was comment originally, something would actually be shown in the margin here. But that's something that the rendering software would do. The encoding in Visual Meta would probably just say, at this XY location in PDF, or between these two lines of text, that's where it belongs. And then it can be indicated in different ways.
Mm.
It's just important the document can be read without it. But if the reader chooses to invoke it, it should be easy. But also, so it does the little, hang on, can we even do?
So how does this compare to a margin note? Because I think I'm thinking of margin notes in a sense, things that are on the side and not really in the main flow.
I would say they're the same. I mean, the difference is almost presentational rather than structural. So you basically have an annotation which is not a complex data object, which is linked to a specific linear point in the primary flow of the document. Whether it's drawn on the side, on top of, whatever, is an implementational issue. I think the thing that I think Fred's getting at is the point is, it's the addressability. You've got to know what it is, and you've got to be able to put it in the right place. And depending on the context, no, I'm now being told I'm wrong. Okay, far away.
I'm not telling you you're wrong. I'm just saying that this has a different purpose. This is for me, the student author, in crafting a paper. I'm writing stuff that is only for me, not for anybody else, except for in this very interesting situation Mark is talking about. And a margin note or an end note is designed for the reader. So that's why I think it's very different process, very different aims, very different types of data.
But isn't the difference there just the intent rather than the nature of the comment? Anyway, I'm not trying to split hairs, but I'm just wondering actually if they are that different, viewed from the constructional aspect of things rather than the experiential thing. I'm conscious Peter's got his hand up too.
Yeah, in my academic writing, I always wind up with multiple series of footnotes and margin notes. So I actually think of my documents as being a set of parallel texts that have the subtext anchored to given ranges or points in the primary master text.
Yeah, but remember that in this case, and I could easily add an end note to the document right now saying, "Dear teacher, what I tried to do here is so and so." That's established. This is kind of the opposite. This is just me being in meetings with advisors again and again. They're saying, "Look, this section really you need to add this. You need to do this. Blah 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 blah." And
why isn't it in the margins in the PDF and in the inline in author? I would imagine it to be in the margin in both cases, because it usually points to a section or something, and then a margin can kind of show a bracket to what it points toward.
It is in line in both. The only reason I had that little bar in the margin, and that's just something I'm playing around with. We could have a dot in line. We could have all kinds of interfaces for that. I don't really mind that. The only
that's a discovery of forms, isn't it? The bar.
That's exactly what it is. So the teacher should be able to toggle that icon type thing on and off. That's all. And when you click on it, then you get a floating thing. So it isn't in the margin or it's floating above.
And that notion of the item just being for yourself just made me think of, okay, how can we have that in our visual meta and only have a subset of readers be able to read it? So then should you maybe have an encrypted comment in the visual meta so that it could be scanned in and read, and then with the appropriate password rendered into a human readable form? But if I get a copy of your data, your comment to yourself would still be in the visual meta, but I couldn't do anything with it other than pass it along to someone who knows the password to be able to get access to it.
I think that's structurally impossible in visual meta, because visual meta is readable for everybody. However, it is the notion
content of the visual meta itself could be a set of encrypted symbols.
It could be, but that's still going against the notion.
Even just like a ROT 13, just so that it isn't instantly visible to you as you're skimming the document.
No, yeah, but remember, visual meta is always at the back of the document, right? But I think the notion of different readers is definitely a good one, both for the glossary and for endnotes and for this. If the reader is logged in as teacher, let's say, maybe this is visible by default. But if this is an examiner, maybe not. So yeah, this definitely interesting to have a tag in visual meta about intended readers.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't Scrivener have functionality like that, so that you can have different slices of a document that can appear in different contexts? I vaguely recall Scrivener having that functionality in there.
I can have a look. I've got the sort of, I haven't played around with it for a bit, but you definitely have a look. I mean, I sense in a way that I think we're arguing, well, in a sense, we're arguing in agreement in that I suppose the most trivial way of describing this is, the things are in line because rather in the way that you add code notes into code, because normally you don't have a way to make it a note it any other way. But it's a note. It's a note with a special purpose. So where we've come around the loop is that as long as the annotation has an addressable point in the primary document text flow, and I think the other thing we realized is it may need an annotation to the annotation to say what its purpose is.
This is not an annotation.
Well, all right. Well, I don't know why. The thing is that this thing has a thing that tells it that it's not the same as some other thing. So I don't want to get too bound up in the words, but I think in terms of the complexity that Adam was alluding to, so I don't actually think it's particularly complex. So what I'm seeing in the manifest now is a run of text, which is this note, this writing, and another thing that sits alongside it that says the reason for it being written, or the reason that it might be, or the reason it is being shown or not shown. And that little glob of information needs to have glue to know where to go in the document. That's sort of how it pulls apart to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, Raphael?
Yeah, hearing you guys talk about different styles on how to present information and the notes and citations and things like that, I'm reminded of the Chicago Manual of Style. I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
Yes. Oh my God.
So this is the book version, but the website has a digital version on how things should be structured. And I think that's a really nice way to, it's a good place to take a look at how the standards are and how they can either adapt or evolve. I would take a look at the Chicago Manual of Style.
But how,
I don't know if it,
does it address stuff that shouldn't be in the document? Because this is almost like post-its for teacher that shouldn't be there.
yeah, but I mean, I guess what I wanted to compliment is there something like this for academia? The Academia Manual of Style.
Yes, there
If
is.
only.
And before Adam, before you go on, yes,
Your
there is.
thesis
That's
committee.
the problem. There's hundreds of thousands of them. You know, there's two main ones. You know, there is author date in brackets, and then there's number. Those are the main ones. But how you actually do the reference section is insanely different. And if the teacher doesn't like it, you're wearing the wrong makeup to class. It's so superficial and so annoying. It is one of the main reasons I'm doing this work. Not that I'll be able to change it, but at least I'm fighting it. Absolutely crazy. Because it's not, they're not going to say you're doing Vancouver style. They're going to say you're doing Vancouver style in the style that this department in this university wants to. And by the way, we're not really going to tell you what it is. Because when I search for the different departments, it's not available. It's teachers saying, oh my God, you had it in italic. What do you think this is? A zoo, right?
What
Anyway,
gets me mad is the dogmatic way of thinking, because at some point in time, somebody has to I know we're going to get into the conversation of there's 500 new standards now, but I don't know, it gets me always mad because people have to, when people have standard, for example, we have a standard for light bulbs. I can buy a light bulb anywhere else and I can put a light bulb here, but it took a cartel mafia of light bulb people to create that standard. And it's maddening.
But within the academic stuff, this is the secret handshake. And when I click around on the link you sent me, when I get to the point where they tell me what it is, I have to pay money to log in. And that's just the general one. So it's absolutely crazy, ludicrous. Adam, please restore sanity to the conversation.
I can't promise that. I can promise that I add other insanities to it. So this question about, to me, it's a question of how, if the annotations, where they live, if they live in the text or besides the text. And that's strange feedback here. So what are your thoughts on my idea is to make a universal visual meta standard or something. Most of the annotations of the kind of you're describing here is that the actual comment, it only lives in the visual meta. It's not in the text, but it's in the meta section. So even though it can be displayed inline in author or in the margin, maybe that's optional, or your opinion as the software developer. But for someone else having a similar software, they can render it on the side, that comment. Because I think it's good to have a more unified framework for handling all the kind of annotations. And I think this is an annotation, but it's a personal annotation. And you can imagine that you want to have more later on, maybe a to-do list thing, or maybe this is extra good, or this is what I'm going to work on tomorrow, kind of annotation that is similar in spirit. It's just for you. It's a note to a future self or to your teacher, but a very small group. All those kinds of annotations that are personal, I think they should be handled in a similar way to the public annotations. Live in a separate section in the meta and not as text inline, because that is a madness that created so many problems for HTML and because then you want styles inline, and then you want structure inline, and then you want metadata inline, and then you want 100 other things that are so interwoven that you can't really use them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But Adam, don't forget, PDF doesn't allow anything inline. It is a flat format. So
Yeah, but author is not a
individual
PDF. So I'm mostly commenting on author and the process before the manuscript side, or the
Right.
things that generates PDF. PDF, it's a publication format that is different, but it can be augmented, of course. But for the document philosophy for author, I think it's really useful to think that these annotations lives by the side, and design the data format and everything around that.
I'm not going to do that because even you're right, it could be another software, but in Author, the margins do something. I'll just show you real quick. Hang on. Because when I go in full screen, I can do this. So
Yep.
this, right? So that means that this does something else. When I scroll, it doesn't follow.
No, so that's a left side, but say let's say the right side. If you would have the right side for follow and the left side for document notes. Imagine that those followed, and on the left side they were global.
I'm going to have to bow out now. I have to provide my mom with transport for another doctor's visit. I left a couple links in the sidebar to some material on legal citations, which is even more evil, because the standard for legal citation is specified down to how you abbreviate the name of each resource, which is utterly absurd because there are so many sources out there, no one can remember what they are. So literally, we're required to go to a book to look up the way to abbreviate something, forcing the person who's reading it to go to the same book to look up what the abbreviation means. I mean, for a couple common things, it's all right, but for the vast majority of cases, it's utterly insane, and all to save a couple specks of ink in hard copy books that are no longer even printed out in hard copy. Anyhow, guys, I'll see you Friday. I've got to get moving.
Okay, Peter.
I have to go cook as well. Frodo, I'll see you on Wednesday then.
Yeah, look forward. But Raphael, you're also going to think about some of the design issues here, right?
Yes, the color, layout, and positioning of things for UI, UX. I already have it written down on my index card.
All right,
Okay.
Thanks.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
I've got a quick one for you, Freddie. I mean, and this isn't me stirring the pot. I mean, I'm not sure it's strictly true that PDF is a single thing. Actually, a PDF is a wrapper in its most basic form. You can have all sorts of stuff in there. So, but I mean, I don't think that was the point you're making, that in terms of the main text within it, it is a thing because it's drawn onto a virtual bit of paper. That's how PostScript works. But I sense, and thinking conversations that I had in recent days about, you know, sort of being very visual in thinking as opposed to maybe being very abstract in thinking, is that I think really this issue about the margins is an almost a by the by. I think the key point here is the relationship between, and I'm going to use the word in the loosest sense of the word, the annotation stream and the main text. And I think, so where it renders on the screen is an implementational thing. The structural part that's important, and I think it was Adam or yourself mentioned, yeah, is probably it wants to live outside the main text precisely so it doesn't travel with it and it can be addressed separately. And you know, whether it's encrypted or something is a downstream implementational issue. But I think just the fact that it's a separate thing, and then actually the tool that's rendering it can, you know, find it and it can draw it on the side, or it can draw it over the top, it can do whatever. All it has to, the main thing it has to know is what it is, why it's showing it, if that's some kind of an optional or filter effect, and where it links to in the data flow. And actually that's probably enough structure. And then within that, there may be an argument about whether it's encoded in JavaScript or something else. But if I recall, most of the stuff that's done inside a PDF is JavaScript. Well, just because.
Well, I mean,
so
we are, yes, I think I agree on all those points. With maybe, yeah. So what we need to do is decide, unless Jacob has a better idea, how should we encode the glossary and stuff. I mean, the glossary, currently all we do is we have a heading that says glossary, the term is in double quotes. The definition is what comes after that. And when there's a new term, that means the previous one is stopped. It's really, really basic, and it works so far. So we should probably adopt a similar approach to how we encode this stuff, if we're ever going to encode it. And then there is that question of, okay, so you know the headings in JSON, they are just the heading level 1 text and all of that. And then at the end, it can say who the author is of the text in there. I'm sure we can adopt a similar logic to who a desired reader will be.
Mhm.
You know, this is for teacher, this is for grade 1, this is for advanced, way down the line, but logically, since it came up earlier, right?
I mean, JSON, in fairness, is only just a set of arrays and sort of nested objects, trying to make it as simple as possible and to cut down to have the minimum number of escape characters, because you always end up, you know, software keeps repeating itself of getting stuck in a world where it runs out of escape characters and something breaks. And you cannot simply say what you need to say to the machine, because you have to escape something that can't be escaped. So, you know, I think maybe to shift the issue of encoding is to sort of shift it around and thinking, well, right, you know, well, we need to maybe account for double byte languages. I think it's probably not Roman script. I think it's more issues like that, as opposed to whether it's in some bit in quotes or in square brackets or something. You probably do want an object structure for some of it. So this is where I'm a bit confused about the JSON thing, because I mean, the question really is, there's the almost like the character encoding level is one thing, just making sure we're not, you know, lowballing that and having too limited a set. But I think something like UTF, I may be wrong, works for most things at the moment. And then really the internal structure within a data object is well, how complex are the objects going to get? You know, if it's just a run of text, it's just a run of text. And whether it's sort of formally JSON or not almost becomes moot. You know, if it's one sentence delimited by probably a pair of straight double quotes or something. So there's a danger of complicating the specification here.
I mean, it's a yeah, good discussion though. Right. I guess we have exhausted our discussion for today, unless you have something to put in, Adam, particularly. Then we just see what Jacob may have to say on Friday.
I can't be here on Friday, unfortunately.
I guess it could affect you.
So I have to say my final words now.
Yeah, that's okay.
So one main question, it's not so much about JSON or not, but addressability. How do you point towards a place in the text? As we, for example, with the authors, we're kind of painting paragraphs with author names here, conceptually. That some paragraphs or some things, some text under a heading is painted with an author name. And same with the comments and your personal comments or notes, and same thing with many other things. We want to paint here. So we need a way to point to things that both works in the manuscript format in author, and that is maybe a bit easier because it's a character location. It's character 145 to 610, a range of characters. But in PDF that is broken because it has already chopped out the text and placed it quite graphically on the page, with no memory of a page location or a single location. So then you need a different way of pointing. So you need to kind of point to the specific, and it can be as you do it now, kind of starting from the beginning of the PDF documents and then basically searching forward for this heading, next heading, next heading, until you hit the third heading with the exact name. But it's very error prone. So at least when you point towards towards places in the text, it should be at least a page.
Would in terms of the bridge into the structurally into the PDF,
Yep.
I'm trying to think. I mean, it's incredibly badly documented in an accessible sense, but because PDFs sort of, there are a number of sort of hacks of addressing into PDFs, but I think the thing that's pretty much not really used outside Adobe's own stuff are named destinations, which I suspect route right down into the PostScript. So in other words, they actually are providing the addressability, even if it's to a notional, a virtual two-dimensional page space, but it's saying, this location on this space. So maybe that might, I don't know enough about it, but I sense that might be the glue, because I know that although you can notionally load in a web browser, you can point to a PDF and give it a page number, and if you're lucky, it'll get the right page number according to how the numbers of the pages are numbered internally. But I think that's very fragile, and I think named documentation and named destinations is where it's at. But very few PDF tools I've tried to sort of explore seem to support that. And I suspect that I'm coming to the suspicion that's probably because it's harder to implement, because it has to be implemented right at the PostScript level. And that's like extra work, and there are fewer people who know how to do it. But it might be where we need to go. I don't know. I'll just throw that out there.
I have a big question, guys. There's something we forgot last time. Let me just show you this. We're talking about author names, right? Didn't we have a thing where we, after the normal BibTeX, we had author 1, author 2, author 3,
Yeah.
and so on? It's not, and I must have just forgotten to put it in. What was the standard we did that? Is that just written out the way that the person would want it written out? So it's first name first?
You've got a problem. You got two choices. You've either got the screen written, first von, last the third, which is fine as a label if you're just going to take the label from this place and stick it somewhere else. For almost any other mechanism, it's a really pain in the ass because you've got no marker as to where the structural parts of the name are.
Yeah, no, I know. That's the discussion we had. So we decided,
yeah.
In the normal BibTeX, we just do as
the other way around. You'll be Antonini, Alessio, because and is the entity limiter.
I don't know why.
And the comma is a
Yeah, absolutely. This is an old version, of course.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So that's fair enough. But in order to make it a bit more ironclad for our own format, here, should we just have it the way they would write it, where the last, what should this be? Just dictate for me, guys. Adam, in order for you to solve
who is it for? Is it for me solving kind of a complex search, or is it just for displaying a label somewhere? For doing magic. Yeah, complex magic things. Then I need much more structured data. I want to know what the last name is.
Well, can you just write that down or tell me now? Okay, so author number 1. How do I know first name is, last name is, middle name is, title is? How do you want to see that? This is a case where you dictate, and that's the way it is.
Yeah, but it follows the discussion on JSON and other things, because I don't want to have 4 different formats in the same Visual Meta, that we have JSONs for the heading, that we have a custom format for authors. I want to have something similar here, so it follows that discussion.
I can perhaps add something here, and I've found some references which I can send on to Fred. It's on my sort of to-do list. I was delving into the back end of Stack Overflow for LaTeX. One of BibTeX's problems, it offered 2 ways. One of which is the as you read it thing, which is actually broken for the very reason Adam's just mentioned. And most people, thankfully, are doing it the other way, which looks harder to read, but is you can do more with. We definitely need to use the latter. There is some description of what that format is, and I can give it to you. And I think we just, we should choose to not accept the other one of first name, last name, because that way madness lies.
Okay, guys,
It's literally only useful for labeling, and you can't, you have no idea of what that means.
I agree. What about having one of these per author?
Yes. Now we discussed that because I think we needed to be able to tie that author name to an ID, if I recall. Wasn't that the issue? Because we were talking about.
So that one or an internal ID, a Vision Meta ID. So ORCID, you can have both. It's no problem having multiple IDs, but you should at least have one internal ID that can be used in the document, or perhaps even globally, that you can generate it once and use it all the time.
Yeah. So in fact, you for author one, then your example there, you don't really need first, middle, and last name, because that's already known about by anything that can pass the general BibTeX. The bits that the BibTeX author field won't hold about them is more that their title, their ORCID number, their GUID. Yes. The rest of it we don't need to redefine. It just makes
still, Mark, when I do the system here, if I can avoid reading BibTeX and having a BibTeX parser, if the system can just generate both, because it's not that many names, it's quite few names and not much data. It's just that if I can get the last name and search immediately for it, whether it's Jason or something else, that would make the life a lot easier. And also I think BibTeX is, if people
point taken.
If people could have Jason instead of BibTeX nowadays, I think many would take it, because you could have nested structures in a common way, and you could extend it as you like.
Well, in fairness, sort of BibTeX does, but no one knows how to do it.
Exactly.
Well,
Adam, this is the core question for Friday. So, do you want this in BibTeX style, or do you want it in JSON? If you want this in JSON style, I'm really happy to just actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to copy this, go into our chat, paste it in. And if you want to, hang on a second, to rewrite that in JSON, I'm super happy to do that. What is best for you as a builder of visual worlds? This is all about pleasing you, end and beginning of story.
Yeah, pleasing me. I also think about others, and there are some things are quick and dirty, and then it's. But if I want to live with this for 20 years, that is kind of a different question.
Well, this bit here is quick and dirty. This. So we have.
Or half quick and half dirty.
Yeah, done, easy, no problem. Relatively speaking, this is not 20 years. This is 1,000 years.
Yeah, and we haven't even got into whether people are singular or plural. All these other wonderful things we're stressing into, which are actually all pertinent to the long-term record. But probably the main thing is, I mean, whether the author one bit is written read looking like Jason or looking like this, probably more important is figuring out which bits are in there, and you've got most of that. Middle name, no, because there are multiple middle names. What you need is, we need the prefix, the first or given name, whatever we're going to call it, middle names, which may be a number of them. Then you've got the prenominal, which is because arguably you want to know whether it sorts on the name may not sort on the whole of the last name. So if I'm von der Trapp, it might sort under T, but the last name is printed as von der Trapp. And then I've got something like postnominal, like the third. I mean, I'm afraid it's that complicated.
Yeah, but that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that most of us say, John Q. Doe is neither here nor there.
is that called postfix or what is it called?
I'll try and look that up. I'll try and get a better sort of, properly defined terminology for that. I just need to go and look at that. I can't do that on the fly for you now.
No, that's okay. But
Yeah, so something like this would be, but I wonder if it should be, if it should be BibTeX at all, or if it should, it's complicated because this entry could just as well go down into the JSON entry below. Now it's called headings, but it could just as well be called JSON, the big JSON blob.
yeah,
With
Actually,
all,
that's true, because effectively what you're doing is you're providing an enhanced annotation to the BibTeX is what's happening here, isn't it? And again, don't get too strung up on what I mean by when I use the word annotation. Now, there's nothing to unpack from that. But so in other words, you've got at minimum the BibTeX about the person. What this extra blob of data is giving you is important stuff to enable you to do more clever.
clever search
yeah.
or importing the data, because it can be very good to have the last name, even if it's not filled in. Then I know that as well. But when it is filled in by the author in the software, it's good because then at least I know the last name. Then I can remove that from the message string above. Or
yeah, and
so
the BibTeX is in a sense the minimum viable construct. And if you've got some wonderfully rich data about the authors elsewhere, that's great. But somebody may not know, because I may be writing about people like in China and I haven't a clue about how their names are constructed or something. So
exactly. Well, okay, Adam, unless you come back to me with an email saying, no, it should be like this, we will leave it like this.
You're threatening me.
No.
Good tactics.
And the opposite, actually, because if there's no point duplicating efforts. If Jacob really has something that he wants to do different, he will just have to propose that and you will comment, because you and him are the two implementers of this. So if you disagree, it's probably going to be a very useful disagreement.
Yeah, but I really like the input of, for example, Mark as a data person. Because we programmers, we do easy, quick fixes. We get a PowerPoint with ideas to implement, and then we do quick fixes that are not well thought through. So it's good.
If Mark is data, you must be Spock.
Yeah. Okay, I have to go now due to calls.
Anyway, if I have any bright ideas, Adam, I'll drop you. I mean, are you around in the week? If you don't want to,
I'll be around.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it will be, but if I have a sudden rush of blood to the head and a bright idea, I'll keep you posted. And I'll think on those other things I mentioned to help you with.
Yeah, and it will also be interesting to hear either before the meeting or during the meeting what Jacob think. Why it sounded like he was leaning away from JSON, and maybe for very good reason, or he may have some thoughts that are really interested. Because I have a gut feeling I'm somewhat leaning away from JSON as well, and I'm not really sure why, because it has most of the affordances, except for maybe writability and readability, easy readability, writability for humans.
And we've got, in a sense, we're dealing with two levels of formatting too, because so one is that there's the JSON sort of thing is almost at the programming level.
Yep.
I've got these bits, how do I stick them together and play and put the Lego in different order. The level below that is, can I encode a Cambodian name at all and actually get it out? So there's that lower structure as well. But that in the post-Unicode age, I think is broadly fixed.
Yeah.
So it'd be really interesting to see what Jacob's sort of issue is, and these formats come and go. So
yeah. And as I've
color.
said before, addressability and identifiers is the biggest unsolved thing. How you point deep into a PDF, or how you identify an author uniquely, or how do you identify things uniquely. So identifier numbers and authors, or and addressability is a main issue that needs to be solved. And
Yeah.
in a way, RDF may be messed up just because they didn't really solve the addressability issue good enough in many cases.
I mean,
Like
my gut feeling is one of the things that I've been desperately trying to avoid is turning all this into linked data, simply because my experience of working with, a large bunch of people, a sort of large cohort of PhD students, they're all bright enough to be on the bus. Only about one of them understood in any real sense linked data, and that's my concern, because that's a massive fragility in what we're doing. It's not that linked data doesn't work when it's used in the right place. What we're doing can be turned into linked data, but storing it as linked data, I have real concerns about. I'm just not sure it's robust enough yet in terms of its livability. Otherwise, you just get a whole of a ton of gobbledygook. Whereas I think we're doing something that can be transformed when needed into that thing. But that's why I'm very concerned. I need to go away and think about sort of GUIDs. And I know someone will just say, we'll just make it linked data, but to me, that is not the answer.
Mark, it's 1:30. I have to go too.
Yeah, okay, yeah, cool. Yep.
Look forward to continuing the conversation, guys. This is really amazing. Have a good evening. Oh, by the way, Mark, is it raining where you are?
Yeah, just started raining.
Yeah, here it's super raining, so it must be moving south. I probably got it from Sweden or something.
Yeah, I've got all bloody incoming weather, eh?
All right.
I'm hanging up
Yes.
now.
Take care, have a safe week. Okay, bye.